grandpa stole his first buggy in 1892. I met your grandma pig slopping in 46.
Oh, every Christmas we'd visit my Uncle Fred in prison.
Well, hello, America, and welcome to America's Family History Show, Extreme Genes and ExtremeGenes.com. It is Fisher here, your Radio Root sleuth, on the program where we shake your family tree and watch the nuts fall out. Great to have you along. Great guests coming up today. You're going to appreciate Helena Boucher. She's from Ohio. She's an ordinary person with an extraordinary find out of Belgium, and she's got quite a tale to tell from her family as well. And then later in the show, from our sponsors over at Legacy Tree Genealogist Kate Ekman is back talking about, what am I missing? It's a question we often ask when we're trying to put together a genealogical puzzle, and it just isn't coming. She'll talk about one such case coming up here a little later on in the show. And by the way, if you haven't checked out our Extreme Genes website, it's been redesigned, and we've got courses for you there, including basic genealogy and how to use DNA matches to break through your brick walls and find birth families and to confirm your genealogical lines. It's all right there, so check it out. Hey, David Allen Lambert is standing by in Boston right now, the chief genealogist of the New England Historic Genealogical Society and AmericanAncestors.org. David, that doesn't all fit on one badge that you wear around the center, does it?
It wraps around a couple of times, but that's okay. Mm-hmm. How are you?
I am doing well. I had a really weird experience this week. I was working on my wife's matches, actually working through her uncle and her mother, to try to find some matches to do a breakthrough on a second great-grandmother. And I was making some good progress on that. And as people who do DNA research know, that sometimes you find a match, and if they have a tree up, sometimes it's a little bit short, and you're trying to figure out, well, how do they match to me or to the person I'm trying to work on here? And so I found this one match and looked at his short little tree and started to extend it because he had a mother with a very unusual name. And so as I went to newspapers.com to see if I could find the marriage of his parents that might name the parents of his father, I found this horrible story that talked about this pair of brothers who murdered their grandmother that was in this family. A blunt instrument murdered grandma and grandma's boyfriend, and apparently the reason was they were going to be the heirs after their mom to her fortune, and they feared that if she married the boyfriend, then they wouldn't get any of the money. So they both knocked off these two people. The younger brother then turned on the older brother. He got a reduced sentence of like 35 years. The older brother got life. So I thought, wow, that's a terrible story. And then when I went back to the match, I realized that the match was the younger brother. And I'm like, oh, man, that's so weird. I did not message him to ask him to Thanksgiving, by the way.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you that. So are they on your holiday card list this year?
No, they'll just keep at a distance a little bit. But that I haven't had that kind of thing happen before. Have you?
Well, I think that's a great story. You need to be a guest on Extreme Genes. Well, for me, I'm really excited because, a lot of us are traveling around now. I went to Florida at the end of the summer, but my bigger trip that I am looking forward to is to the Family History Library in November. NEHS is running a tour, and it'll be the first time the staff of NEHS will be back in Utah since 2019, other than Rootstock. Well, I'll tell you, the stories are great. I love them when they're anniversary stories. And if you've ever heard of Mrs. O'Leary's cow, you probably know I'm talking about the 1871 fire that destroyed most of Chicago and a lot of genealogical records. Well, you really can't blame Mrs. O'Leary's cow now. The great-great-granddaughter has come forward and said that she has basically been unjustly accused because she was an Irish immigrant.
Yeah, well, the story goes that there was a group of people partying across the street, and it wasn't unusual for them to go over and try to steal milk from the cow that was over there for whatever the reason is. And
not cow tipping.
No, not cow tipping, but it's believed that one of those people actually started the fire in that barn. Mrs. O'Leary's been exonerated in this whole thing, and yet it's still been taught in various schools over the years that this was a fact, that it was Mrs. O'Leary's cow. So that has been officially disproven by the Chicago City Council.
You know, it's the strangest things that people collect, but hair art was a very big thing back in the 19th century. This is a story about the hair of Abraham Lincoln and Hannibal Hamlin and William Henry Seward and others that created this eagle made out of hair that was created for a fundraiser for the U.S. Sanitary Commission during the Civil War. And it's really ornate, and it's owned by the Onondaga Historical Society in New York, but it's quite amazing to see it's all woven together. If you've ever seen hair art from long ago, these are usually little small pieces that are put into jewelry or into rings. But it's haunting how much this looks like an eagle, all made out of hair.
Yep. And they say the person who actually wound up owning it cost like $1, and the person owned it for years and years and years before turning it over to the Onondaga people in Syracuse, New York. And they say because they try to protect it from the light, it's only been publicly seen like 3 or 4 times in the last 150 years.
Just think of the DNA potential.
Yeah, stop it, David. Stop it.
Well, I'll tell you, when you rent a home the next time, or maybe go on one of those vacations, be careful where you look, because a lady was doing some work and found out this house that she was renting in Lompoc, California, has a hidden basement under it. The house was built in 1908, and these hidden stairs under her patio led to a corridor, 2 doors. And she did a TikTok video as she walked down it. It was something shy of watching an Alfred Hitchcock movie late at night. Yeah, so always beware. You might have more than you bargained for when you have an unexplored basement the size of your entire rented apartment under your patio.
Crazy. And they say it may have had something to do with bootleggers back in the day.
That's exactly, yeah. So they're not looking for Jimmy Hoffa there, but they are, in fact, looking for the remnants probably of something that would have been from the days of bootleggers. Maybe my grandfather was
right.
there.
It could have been.
Yeah. Well, that's all I have from Beantown, but I want to remind you, if you're not a member of American Ancestors, you can save $20 by using the coupon code EXTREME on AmericanAncestors.org.
All right, David, thanks so much. Talk to you at the back end of the show, of course, for Ask Us Anything. And coming up next, another ordinary person with an extraordinary find and how she did it so we can learn from her when we return in 3 minutes on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show.
Unknown parentage, lineage society membership, building your family tree, leaving a legacy. Regardless of your reasons for hiring a professional researcher, Legacy Tree Genealogists can help you discover your family's past. Their genealogists are highly rated in their field with specialties in DNA analysis, historical context, and forensic genealogy. For nearly 20 years, Legacy Tree Genealogists have created thousands of professionally bound and digital reports for families like yours around the world. So whether you've hit a brick wall in your research or are just getting started, Legacy Tree Genealogists can help you tell your story and preserve it for generations to come. To receive a free estimate for professional research, visit legacytree.com or call 1-800-818-1476. That's 1-800-818-1476. We'd be happy to talk to you. Legacy Tree Genealogists.
Hey Genies, it's Fisher here, and my shiny new ExtremeGenes.com website has been described as having that new car smell. I love hearing that. Having been with you for over 8 years now, it felt like time to help out listeners and followers who need to know the basics of genealogical research, as well as how to understand your DNA test results, and to be able to put them to work for you, breaking down brick walls, identifying birth parents, locating new cousins who may have photos and information that can't be found anywhere else, and verifying your paper trails. Yes, DNA can do all that, and I can show you how. Check out the all-new ExtremeGenes.com website and download the free Genealogy Strategy Roadmap and the free DNA Starter Guide. Then, if you like what you see, you can take those next steps to sign up for the video courses that you can watch at your leisure. I'll take you through all the basics, step by step. Find out more now at ExtremeGenes.com.
Anytime is a great time to learn more about your family. Did you miss Roots Tech Connect this year? It's not too late to experience Roots Tech classes, keynotes, and how-to content. Just visit rootstech.org to see what you missed and to experience Roots Tech Connect on your own timetable. Select inspiring and insightful messages that will help you in your pursuit to connect with and share your family story in new ways. You can then use the free resources found at FamilySearch.org or the Family Search Family Tree app to have a deeper personal experience getting to know your family, past and present. Connecting with family and learning about your ancestors provides healing, peace, and a sense of belonging. And it's easy to share what you learn with others to help and inspire them as well. Visit rootstech.org for some inspiration or visit FamilySearch.org to continue on your journey of family discovery today.
You know, one of the things I enjoy most doing Extreme Genes is finding ordinary people with extraordinary finds and finding out how they did it so we can all learn from them. And one of those people is Helena Boucher. She's on the line with us right now from Ohio. And Helena, welcome to Extreme Genes. It's great to have you.
Thanks. Yeah, this is awesome.
You had quite a brick wall that you had to smash through, and you got a little help. But let's just get to the basics here. Start us at the beginning and tell us what your whole story was.
Okay, well, I started out with my second great-grandfather, who I knew his identity, but I could not figure out who his father was. And so I went to a group on Facebook called the Belgian Researchers, and I put my stuff up there. And they came back in about 45 minutes and said, your third great-grandfather is Anna Clay. And from that, they all went nuts and took me back to about 1565. It was crazy.
Wow.
And they have a great quarterly magazine that they put out called Belgian Laces. It's like $15 a year to subscribe, and they're spectacular.
And how long had you had this brick wall?
Oh, my gosh, probably 20 years.
20 years, and then in 45 minutes, there's your answer.
That's right.
Wow.
Yeah, it was wow, yeah.
And did it take you back in all different directions there to the 1500s?
Yes, but I think the one thing that I learned from that is that my family had been in Pasturage, which is now part of Coalfontaine area of Belgium, for 12 or 13 generations. They've been there since coal was discovered in Belgium in the 12th century.
Wow. So your family was all coal miners then till how recently?
That ended with my grandfather, and that's a very interesting story how that took place. My great-grandfather came over from France because they had migrated from Belgium to France in 1879. And by 1885, he was like, you know, the French don't like the Belgians here. They look down on us.
Ah.
Yeah. And there has to be something more. And there was a big depression in that area of the country until about 1895. So the economic conditions were pretty bad. So he's 22 years old, and he's been working in the mines at this point since he was 11 years old. And I have his work booklet that says he went into the mines at 11, and that was very common. So he decided to pack it up and go to the United States. He lands, and he ends up in central Illinois. There were Belgian tavern owners, and they would run these ads in the French tavern saying, hey, you know, better life, more pay, of course, leaving a lot of stuff out.
Yeah.
So by 1885, he is in Pana, Illinois, which is central Illinois. And from 85 until 97, when he marries my great-grandmother, Sarah Simonin, he's kind of floating around from Pana to Coffee, which is about 45 minutes north. So he marries Sarah Simonin, and probably because Victor Simonin, who's her father, they're working together in the mines. Now, Victor is French.
That's a problem.
So he cannot be excited about his new son-in-law. The other thing about Victor is he was originally a farmer, so he had a little property. He had a little money of his own. And Louis, who from age 22 to 34 didn't have a family, was able to put some money together too. So they get married in 97, and they have 3 kids, the oldest of which is my grandfather, Seraphin, and 2 girls, Sylvie and Adelaide. By 1909, it's not going well. Sarah is like, this guy is a jerk, and I'm suing for separation and injunction. Catholics did that because they didn't want to get a divorce.
Sure.
And she said he was cruel. By 1916, he is a terrible raging alcoholic. And he comes home one day in May of 1916, and she has just sold a calf and has money. She's using this money to buy my grandfather a scholarship to the International Correspondence School. She's saving up to send the girls to nursing school because she's like, no way are they going to marry a minor, and no way is my kid going to stay in the pit.
Right.
So he comes home one day. She sold this calf. He wants the money. And she says no. He pulls out a pistol and he takes aim at her and comes so close that the bullet knocks her hair down, and he shot more. And my Aunt Adelaide is 10 years old at the time, and she's got powder burns on her hair. They run out of the house to a neighbor's house. He thinks he's killed them. He dies under the bed. He shoots himself.
Oh, wow. So he thinks they're all gone. They survived, and then he takes himself out. Wow.
Yeah. But nobody in the family knows what actually happened. And so I, on a whim, type the name into newspapers.com.
Newspapers are the best, aren't they? I mean, they give you all the details, because when you said May of 1916, I thought, now, where did she get that? Well, that had to be a newspaper, yeah.
Well, it is in the Decatur Herald. Panaman shoots at family and dies is one of the headlines. Wife had the money. It was all over the place. And so these articles described exactly what happened, which is why I was able to describe it in such detail.
Do you have pictures of him?
Yes, I do. Very handsome guy. So
your great-grandmother's dream was not to have any of the kids work in the coal mines. Was she able to get them out of there?
Yes. In fact, the International Correspondence School course, and I have all the receipts. It's like a 2-year program. I have all the receipts, but one is missing. Then the correspondence school course was for mining engineering, mind you, so he could get a better job in the mines.
Okay.
But what he did is he took the receipt for surveying, and he's listed on the 1920 census as being a surveyor. So he took that education and he lifted himself out of the pit.
Nice.
And then he went into the Navy and acquired more education that way. And he was sort of a lifelong learner and became an engineer for Hercules aircraft motor tester. And he worked in all kinds of other stuff.
That's a long way from the mines in Belgium.
Yeah. He made sure that all 3 of his kids were educated.
Sure.
My dad ended up going into the Army, so he went with the GI Bill, and there's a whole story there. But he also educated his 2 daughters, who were born in 29 and 31. Very unusual for the time. So basically, his mother's decision to invest in him and to say, this is the end, has basically changed the trajectory of future generations.
You know, this is one of the things I've really enjoyed about family history over the years. I didn't know anything about my great-grandfather, and he had all kinds of issues himself. And my grandfather had one brother who followed after his dad's pattern. That side of the family was a wreck. And my side of the family is stuck together through the thick and thin and been very successful at what they've done because my grandfather broke the pattern. So it sounds like your great-grandmother broke the pattern as well, and she's really kind of a hero to all of you because of what she's done. And you wouldn't have known that without the newspapers.
No, she was just this quiet, unassuming. My aunt said that she met her a couple of times. They lived in different states, and she said she just had an apron on and was always cooking. But to say no to this guy who was not nice, and to live through that, and to have made sure, in spite of all that was going on, that her kids were not going to follow the same pattern. I mean, that's just amazing to me.
Well, and the fact that the kids survived that along with her, obviously an attempted murder-suicide. Thankfully, what she did, I mean, really saved all of you.
Yep.
Unbelievable. So, Helena, let's go back over to Belgium here and the work you did with this Facebook group. Tell us about them. What's the qualification for getting into that group, or is it a wide-open public site?
Oh, it's a wide open public site, and they're super generous. And if you want to know anything about Belgium, either the French side or the Dutch speaking side, very, very knowledgeable folks. There's tons of Facebook groups. I actually joined one that's minor specific and specific to Pas-de-Calais, which is where they had moved from Belgium in 1879. It spans all the way from the mid-1800s to present, but there are tons of photographs of the different mines, including ones that my great-grandfather worked in, and that has just been a treasure trove. And thanks to Google Translate, even if it's in French, you can pretty much figure out what they're saying.
Absolutely. I've done a lot of exchanges like that. You know, it's interesting because we had DNA come along 10 years ago. I mean, really started to explode at that time. It was here before that. And then we also have had the newspapers come along. I think it's been a while before we came to realize, you know, we actually can communicate with people across the pond who are just as into this as we all are, and they love to communicate as well. And I've found not only the people at WikiTree, but also at GeneaNet. They provide a lot of information there that we don't have access to. And I've broken some lines open as a result of that in France. And it's just absolutely amazing the assets that are out there right now if people want to research their history.
Well, speaking of GeneaNet, I think it's really important if you have French heritage to get some information up there.
Yep.
Because I had a cousin, Frederick, reach out to me late last year. There were three brothers, Louis, Adolf, and Albert. And Albert followed Louis to America in 1907. But Adolf didn't come, and we didn't know anything about him. So one day I get this email from Frederick Boucher, and he says, hey, you know, I think we're related. And long story short, he was able to fill in all the blanks about Adolf because he was a descendant of Adolf. Sure. We have a picture of Adolf, which I'd never seen before.
Where was Adolf located?
He was near Pas-de-Calais in Vernacuil.
And for people who aren't familiar with that area, it's actually kind of close to Belgium.
Yes.
It's the northern part of France.
Right. It's about an hour and a half by car from Cofontaine.
Wow. And so you made that connection overseas, and now when we get through the pandemic and you go over there, you can actually get to meet these people and maybe get a little tour of the area.
Yeah, that is definitely on my bucket list to walk the grounds for sure.
Absolutely. Helena, great talking to you. Thanks so much for sharing your story, and congrats on the breakthrough. And thanks for the information, too. I'm sure it'll help a lot of researchers in their journey.
Awesome. Happy to help. Thanks for having me.
And on the way next, Kate Eckman, a genealogist with Legacy Tree Genealogist, is going to talk about that question that we always have, what am I missing? And how she needed to rely on that question to solve a fascinating case. It's coming up next in 5 minutes on Extreme Genes. And welcome back to Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show, and ExtremeGenes.com. It is Fisher here, your radio root sleuth. And it happens all the time to anybody who's in genealogy. The question comes to their mind, what am I missing? Yeah, sometimes things get a little complicated. You can't sort people out. And that's why I'm talking to my friend Kate Eckman from our friends over at Legacy Tree Genealogist, one of our great sponsors. And Kate, you had a client like this not too long ago. These are fun, as long as you can solve it, though, right?
Oh, yes. They are a lot of fun. And this one started out as quite the puzzle. The client had 3 pieces of information, 3 documents about her grandmother, presumably about her grandmother, because they didn't quite match. Her grandmother, she knew her always as Miriam Neighbors, and she had Miriam Neighbors' death certificate. Then she also had Miriam Neighbors' Social Security card. But the problem was that the number on the Social Security card was a different number than on Miriam's death certificate.
Uh-oh.
So she started wondering, can you have 2 Social Security numbers?
Not usually.
Not usually. And then she continued looking at other things that she had, and there was a birth certificate for a girl named Lucy Anderson, who had nothing to do with, as far as she knew, her grandmother.
Now, where did that come from?
It was some of the papers that she had from her grandfather's home after he passed.
Okay.
But the date of Lucy's birth was the same day as the date of Miriam's birth.
Oh, boy. Okay.
So she thought there must be a connection, but what?
Yeah.
And that was her question. How do these 3 records fit together?
Sure.
Are they for the same person? If not, why do we have Lucy Anderson's birth certificate with Miriam Neighbors' papers?
So that would be a good question. And so off you go, and it sounds like it was pretty complicated.
It was. I started by just tracking Lucy down because I had a starting place for her with her birth certificate and her parents. And Lucy was an incredibly interesting young woman. She was very intelligent. She won awards in school and seemed to have a very active social life. And then she eloped at the age of 17.
Okay.
And actually married her cousin, who was 10 years older than her. And that marriage didn't last very long because about 6 months after she married him, she disappeared.
Okay. I mean, gone.
Just disappeared. She went to go visit friends and then never came back again.
Was this one of those things where the family thought she was dead or murdered or something?
The family actually thought that she was a victim of the white slave trade. This happened in the 1950s, and they were very concerned that their daughter had been kidnapped and taken off someplace. So they posted want ads, searched for her in their home state in New Jersey. They searched all up and down the eastern coast looking for her. I'm not sure if she ever showed up again at home or not, to be honest.
Yeah.
Except for the fact that she was mentioned when her father died. She was listed in his obituary as one of his children. So that's the family's being hopeful that she's still alive.
Of course, yeah.
But then they also started proceedings to have her declared legally dead so they could settle the dad's estate. So that's sort of where Lucy ends, is her family is trying to have her declared legally dead.
And what year was this?
And this was in 1956.
Okay. All right. So she's born in 23, and now this is 56, and she's gone. And they want her declared deceased, but apparently she's still alive somewhere.
Yes, apparently. But I couldn't find anything else about Lucy at that point.
Okay.
So now I go back to Miriam's papers, and I start digging into Miriam's life a little bit more and discover that the client's father, remember Miriam is the grandmother, the client's father was born to Miriam and a man named Jacob Neighbors in New York City in 1944.
Okay. During the war.
And during the war, and I tracked that family forward and discovered that Jacob Neighbors was actually Jacob Nobby. He was an immigrant from the Middle East, and I had parts of paperwork, just pieces of his application for citizenship status. I didn't have the whole file. I had just a page of it where he said his wife was named Lucy.
Ah, okay. That's the first time.
So now I have something connecting potentially Lucy to Miriam here.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And I said, let me get the rest of that whole citizenship application. Let's look at that whole A file. Unfortunately, COVID restrictions are preventing us from getting those records.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
So the National Archives in Kansas City is not currently able to process that request.
All right.
So we have two choices. We can just wait until they get open, or we can keep looking. And I'm curious, so we kept looking.
And did you find something new? I mean, you would have wanted to keep looking anyway, I would assume.
I did. Well, we have two Social Security numbers. So let's get their SS5s, those applications for those Social Security numbers.
Right.
Let's see who the women are who applied for them and their dates of birth, and they would name who their parents are.
Sure.
So I sent off and asked for them, and the Social Security Administration was very kind, and they sent me one of those Social Security applications and redacted the parents' names.
Oh, no.
Because I couldn't prove that the parents were dead.
Did you storm around your office screaming?
And shook my fist and said, drat you, Social Security Administration.
Right. Parents from a child born in 1923, you're not revealing anything that's private anymore. They're gone. They're dead.
But their rule is because she was not born more than 100 years ago with her death record, I couldn't get those. So in another 2 years, I could get those names unredacted.
So now what?
Second Social Security number. Let's try that one. And they said, well, no, you can't have that because that person could still be alive and you haven't provided us with a death certificate. Because remember, we had a death certificate for one number, but we only had a Social Security card for the other number.
Which would be for Lucy.
Well, they both said they were for Miriam.
Oh, really? Okay.
Both Social Security cards said they were for Miriam with two different numbers.
Crazy.
So I'm still sort of stuck. I don't have an A file. I don't have Social Security card applications. And this is where I had to ask that question that you were asking at the start of this is, what am I missing?
Yeah. What am I missing?
Genealogy is a game of patience. Yeah. And one of the things that we say a lot at Legacy Tree Genealogists is that the good news is everyone we're working with is already dead. So the answers aren't going to escape us.
No.
It's just a matter of us finding those
They're
answers.
still going to be dead. That's right.
Then I remembered I hadn't quite finished all of my research. And I suspect some of your listeners have already caught on to the fact that I talked about Lucy's father, but what about Lucy's mother? And that was the person I had neglected to pay attention to. And so I started looking for Lucy's mother. I began with newspapers because I was hoping for an obituary, and I love newspapers. They always have the answers, well, often. And I found Lucy's mother's obituary. She died in 1968. In the obituary, it mentioned her children. It did include a daughter named Lucy, but it wasn't Lucy Anderson, her maiden name. It was Lucy Neighbors.
Oh, wow.
And that to me was proof that connects that her daughter, Lucy Anderson, became Lucy Neighbors. The only wife that Jacob Neighbors had was Lucy/Miriam. That, in my mind, was sufficient evidence to close that circle until we get that SS5 or the A file from the National Archives.
Well, that's just additional nails, right, to button this whole thing down. Great stuff. She's Kate Ekman. She's with our friends at Legacy Tree Genealogists. It's a great conversation, Kate, because we all have to go through it now and again, being patient and finding what we're looking for.
Yes, thank you. It was fun talking with you, too.
Always enjoy it. All right, you've got questions. Hopefully we've got some answers. David returns in minutes as we go through another round of Ask Us Anything on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show next. All right, Genies, the masks are off, libraries and archives are opening up, and in part because of the pandemic, there are more records online than ever before. That means more opportunities for you to discover your ancestors and piece together their stories. Hey, it's Fisher, and if you haven't joined the official Extreme Genes Facebook group, Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies, there's never been a better time. Here's your chance to visit online with like-minded genies. This is the place for exchanging ideas on new sources, databases, DNA, and, well, strategies. Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies got a whole bunch of genies through the pandemic and will only be better now that things are opening up. It's a great online community that gets better still when you become a part of it. Remember, sometimes it only takes one tip or idea to get your family research where you want it to go. Since it costs you nothing to sign up, why not join us? Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies. Genies, Ancestry.com has just released an important new database, and it's free. It's the Freedmen's Bureau Bank Records and the Freedmen's Bureau Marriage Records. These records are a game changer for African American research. For the first time, searches for ancestors among these records can be done solely within these two databases, making discovery easier than ever before. Every name in these mostly post-Civil War records has been indexed. We're talking 3.5 million names, and they often include the names of parents, siblings, children, former slaveholders. They commonly provide ages, marriage information, and so much more. In some cases, you can read in their own words some of their stories as well as their post-emancipation ambitions and challenges. If you've been hesitant to seek out your African American ancestors because of the pre-1870 research challenges, now is the time to see what information is waiting for you right now for free. Only at Ancestry.com.
Unknown parentage, lineage society membership, building your family tree, leaving a legacy. Regardless of your reasons for hiring a professional researcher, Legacy Tree Genealogists can help you discover your family's past. Their genealogists are highly rated in their field with specialties in DNA analysis, historical context, and forensic genealogy. For nearly 20 years, Legacy Tree Genealogists have created thousands of professionally bound and digital reports for families like yours around the world. So whether you've hit a brick wall in your research or are just getting started, Legacy Legacy Tree Genealogist can help you tell your story and preserve it for generations to come. To receive a free estimate for professional research, visit legacytree.com or call 1-800-818-1476. That's 1-800-818-1476. We'd be happy to talk to you. Legacy Tree Genealogist.
All right, David Allen Lambert is back. It's time for Ask Us Anything once again on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show, and extremegenes.com. David, our first question comes from Albuquerque, New Mexico. Ann Langrig is asking the question. She says, guys, I'm trying to prove that my great-aunt, Nellie, worked for the circus in Missouri in the 1890s. Where do you suggest I look to find more on this story? Thanks, Ann.
Well, we can rule out the 1890 federal census.
Yes.
Can't we? There could be a number of places you're going to find probably a reference to them, but maybe if she had employment, a small town newspaper, which is now online, or maybe a larger paper. Maybe if she was a star of some component of that circus, you could probably find her. I would try like newspapers.com on Ancestry to start.
Yep.
The other thing you want to identify is what were the circuses that were traveling through Missouri in the 1890s. And that might be a hard thing to determine, but that could be your first basic search on newspapers.com.
Yeah.
Because you could say circus in Missouri and see what you get.
Yeah, you could start with that and then make a little list, and then perhaps you can find the name there. Depends also on how common or uncommon her last name is. Mm-hmm. Nellie was a pretty common name in the 1890s, and if it's Nellie Smith, you might have a hard time knowing it was the same person, even if you found that name listed. But nonetheless, if you know what kind of act she did, if it's been passed down orally, that might give an extra clue to you. And you might want to talk to cousins, talk to people who are related through that side of the family to get all the information you can about what that circus career was about. Where did she sign up? Was she part of the animal acts? I mean, even if you found nothing more in newspapers, if you get enough information through the cousins, you might be able to find something there. Also, some of the cousins might have those newspaper articles clipped back in the day that can help you prove. Oh, yes, or photographs, which would be really fun as well. But if you do identify which circus she was at, maybe through that oral tradition, you might even be able to go onto eBay and find pictures or postcards or something from that particular circus that may feature your ancestor.
You know, one place you might try is the Missouri State Museum out in Jefferson City, Missouri, because you never know. They might have circus posters or photographs. Perhaps they had an exhibit on circuses in recent years, and that could pull a little bit of the hard work that you might think you have to start with. Somebody else may have already done it for you.
Wow. This is a really interesting question. I don't think we've ever had a question about circuses before, and obviously they present certain problems because circuses are constantly on the move, and so it's not like there are records constantly made of the people that are involved there. I don't know. Have you ever seen a circus reference in a census record, Dave, like from 1900?
Well, remember, wherever the people are on a certain night of the census, they have to be there. So maybe the enumerator walked through the circus tent and took down all those clowns that he found. One place you might want to try is at the end of her life. Find out if she had an obituary. See if they actually wrote something about her career when she was younger, before she got probably too old to be running around the high wire or as a clown or whatever she did in the circus, riding on the back of a horse. Look at the obituary. That might give you a clue as well.
Right. Great question. One that causes me to scratch my head a little bit to think about all the possibilities. But I would think within the family and newspapers has got to be the best bet, don't you think?
Absolutely. You know, the one thing that would be really nice if there is an account book or surviving records from the actual circus company. Those are strange things, but they do surface at historical societies and state libraries. Say, for instance, that circus was based out of Missouri. Maybe there's a place that has a lot of the ephemera in a museum. And there are, of course, circus museums around the country, too.
True.
You can try with those.
And also county archives. So great question. Really good one, Ann. Thanks so much for it. And we've got another one coming up for you next when we return in 3 minutes on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show. We have returned once again for another round of Ask Us Anything on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show, and extremegenes.com. And David, we have a question here from Minneapolis. Pete Smith is writing, more particularly to me, I guess. Fish, I heard you mention last week that you were helping your high school reunion committee locate missing classmates. We're working on my reunion for the class of 87 right now. What sources do you suggest for tracking living people? Thanks, Pete. That's a good question, Dave. And there are quite a few places for tracking living people. And even when we're doing our genealogy to get back to dead people, we have to do that by finding living people first quite often.
That's very true. And there's a lot of commercial sites that you can use, but you may be able to use things that you use every day, like social media.
Yep.
Like Facebook.
Social media, Facebook is outstanding. The white pages. The one I use the most, and the one I use the most for tracking classmates, is a site called FamilyTreeNow.com. And David, maybe you remember when that came out. I want to say it was like 7 or 8 years ago. There was a big to-do about this site because there was so much information on everybody in there. They do give you the opportunity to opt out, but very few people actually did. So there's just a ton of material there. And so you can enter your living person's name in there, where they lived, maybe the year they were born, and it will pull up all kinds of options for you. And within the information they provide there, you will see who they're related to, various names they go under. Maybe it's like Pete W. Smith or Peter William Smith or something like that. But finding who they're related to can help you be sure that you have the right person. That in addition to the town they live in and what their age is. And then at the bottom, as you scroll down, they'll often have phone numbers like cell phone numbers, home numbers. And if you go down further than that, you'll often find still active email addresses. So there's a ton of information right there. And that's how I'm collecting these names right now. There's a list of 86 classmates they're trying to find, so I just grabbed that and said, all right, who do I know personally so that I would know extra material that might help me identify the right person of the right name, and who has an unusual name. So, I was kind of skimming the cream of the crop, David, and wound up finding 9 of those people right off the bat. And with a few others that I wasn't able to find, I could eliminate them in terms of how easily we're going to be able to find them. So about 1/10 of the whole thing went away in about 2 hours worth of research, largely using that and newspapers.com.
That's a good one because, of course, with all the ladies in your class, their surname may not be the same as it was when you graduated in 1987. And since that's the same year I graduated, I've used the same techniques to try to track down my classmates. The other thing is, remember, use the association game. You track down a few reunion folks and say, hey, do you know how to get a hold of Leslie or Tommy? And you just ask them to see if they've been in touch with them.
There's so many things you can do with it. The newspaper stories not only reveal the marriages, but also, unfortunately, often reveal the deaths, which we are hoping not to find, but that's just the inevitability, especially if you come from a large class. So you can know which list to put them on.
One of the things that I use to try to keep track of my classmates, and we did this for our 20th reunion, I created a group on Facebook, class of 1987 from my high school, invited all the people I found, and then guess what? It's Google searchable, so all of a sudden the classmates might find it. And if you put it early enough, obviously you're celebrating your 35th next year, maybe they'll find it and spread the word.
Yeah, that's a great way to go. So that's how it's done, Pete, and good luck with the reunion next year. I'm looking forward to mine. David, thanks so much for joining us for this. And if you have a question for Ask Us Anything, you can always email us at askusanything@extremegenes.com. Talk to you next week, Dave.
I look forward to it.
And that is our show for this week. Thanks so much for joining us. If you missed any of it or you want to catch it again, of course, listen to the podcast on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Media, extremegenes.com. We're all over the place. We'll talk to you again next week. And remember, as far as everyone knows, we're a nice, normal family.